What's up, chicks and dudes? It's been a while. So I know I dissed on the Kemper, and I was all bummed out on the Kemper for the longest time, but I bought another Kemper, and just out of complete frustration because tube amps break all the time, and I get so sick and tired of it. Sick and tired of it. Sick and tired of it. Did you hear that? So the reason why I bought another Kemper is to try one last little failed attempt at making this thing work for something kind of for the rest of my life. So what I did was, and I'm going to show you guys, and I know I say this all the time and then I don't, post videos, and you guys should hate me, and I don't even know why you guys subscribe to me to begin with. But what I wanted to say is that what I've done to this Kemper amp is kind of tricked it. I could always get like the top end out of the Kemper, and I could trick the Kemper into a guitar cabinet like this, and let me move this over here. I could trick the kind of Kemper to get through a guitar cabinet to sound very guitar amp, tube amp like. This is just my Sebago sitting up here. It's one of my favorite amps I've ever played in my life, but I've got some issues with it. I've got it red plating now, and it's probably my fault and something I did to it stupid. But because I'm always running stuff through the way it's not supposed to be run through, trying to catch a profile that is like crazy real good, So I want to tell you guys what I did as far as tricking this amplifier, because if you hear the touch response, so the volume's just barely up, and I'm on like the 2. So you can see by touch response here. Nice reverb. if it conveys through the microphone, if you guys can hear this, and I'll play this again. Very musical, so I'm going to turn the reverb off. I'm going to turn all of these effects off. Still very, very musical sounding. So musical sounding, for those of you who are not real, familiar with these kind of terms, musical sounding is when an amplifier kind of takes on a life of its own. You stop playing the guitar as much, and we're going to talk more about this. When you stop playing the guitar as much as you play the amplifier, right? And so some guitar amplifiers, and this Sebago amp is one of the best I've ever seen. Dumbles are said to be able to do this, Fenders on 10, Marshalls on 10. They get very musical sounding where the amp kind of takes on a life of its own while you're playing. Some people would argue that that's really the definition of tone, or, for some people, tone is another thing. But what happens in an amplifier like this is you get these overtones, and I've never been able to catch it in the Kemper. Once in a while you can kind of hear it bleed through on some really high-end amps, but there's a growing bunch of guys who own the Kemper who will tell you that the Kemper does not catch the tone of like some of the really high-end amps. To give you an example would be like a red plate amp. A red plate amp is a killer amp. Sebago, Dumble, and there's so many out there. What is it, Bluto Tone or whatever it is, Friedman, and on and on and on. But the Kemper doesn't do a real great job at times of catching that musical sense of an amplifier. And so I found a couple of ways to trick the Kemper that I want to talk to you guys about, and then I'll talk to you about what I've done as far as how I've caught this profile. So if you can see here, and I don't know that you can see on the screen, but this is a 71 Marshall Golub patch, but it's really not that patch. It's just a name I used in there to go over it. And this is a DI patch, and I'm using a vintage 30s in an old Vox cabinet, my favorite cabinet. And then I've got a bunch of effects on here, and I'll kind of run through what those are. So this is a dry tone, right? Let me see, make sure why I got noise here. All right, so it sounds like all of a sudden I've developed noise in this pot, right? So this is no effects at all, and I'm going to go to this this position up here. Ready? I am barely touching the strings, and the volume's barely up, just to give you an example. And with no effects on, you can hear how the musical sense of the amplifier that I've captured here has come through. So if you can listen to that. Very, very, very amp-like. Right? Add a little reverb to it, which is the beauty of the Kemper and its navigational qualities, right? Right? Little delay. Hear it? And then here, I believe in this slot, let me punch it up to make sure I'm doing this right. I have a vintage chorus. Very, very low vintage chorus, and the rate's really low. I barely have it on. I'm trying to add back some of the very little subtleties of the musical qualities of a tube amplifier, right? So that's the chorus, and then I believe here I have a flanger. And this is the recipe what I've started to use on the Kemper, right? How much more musical it sounds? And all I've got is the volume turned down, so. So I finally tricked the Kemper into, even down at low volumes, very low volumes. I mean, this volume is barely cracked, right? And as soon as the volume starts to come up, it'll sounds very much like an amp. a lot of profiles out there. I've never seen one yet act or react the way this one does. And I'm going to tell you how I did it. So for a very long time, and I've been working on this for a very long time, I had to order a new Kemper, right? I didn't have one. I sold mine. And so what I did was I tore apart my Marshall Major, and I kept tweaking it and tweaking it and tweaking it and tweaking it until the overtones out of the amplifier were so crazy, because that's what happens in the Kemper. The Kemper loses something, and I've talked about this in other videos. When you go from analog to digital, you lose something. It's just the way it is. So what I knew I had to do was if I wanted bass out of the profile that I was going to profile into this, which is just capturing the sound of the tube amplifier into a profile that will last here forever. The concept is great, but it never really kind of tricked my ear into thinking it was a tube amplifier. And there's still some very, very subtle differences. You could argue with some amp guru guys or some people who know tube amplifiers or play the blues that it doesn't sound like it. But yesterday at a Guitar Center, I took my Kemper in there, and there was a couple of kind of semi-famous-y little guitar players, and I won't mention their name because they don't want me to. But there was a couple of guys in the Guitar Center, and I took the Kemper in there and hooked it up, and I had them turn their back and listen to this profile next to a Fender, and I said, tell me which one is the tube amp versus the digital amp, and 2 out of 3 people failed. And so it's got me to believe that I've got a very, very good profile here. And it's a Marshall Major profile. That's an ultra linear amp I've showed on some of my other videos. It is a killer amp, and what I did to it was I completely modified the inside of it. If an amp guy or an amp technician looked on the inside of this amplifier, they'd be like, you're an idiot, because the amp on the inside is completely wired goofy. There's caps where there shouldn't be caps. There's all kinds of weird stuff going on to accentuate the overtones that I needed, so that when I captured the print of that amplifier, I knew it would squash them back down again. So I had to make them overly exaggerated to get them into the Kemper. I hope that does that much sense, y'all? And so what I did was I also put KT150s in that Marshall Major, which is probably a big no-no. And then I screwed around with the biasing. And if I'm using terms you guys don't know about, I just did everything I could possibly to get a huge bottom end. Because the other thing that I think the Kemper slightly lacks is this power amp in the Kemper it's okay, but if you use a different style of digital power amp or tube power amp, which is what this is doing sitting up here, I use the power amp out of this. I run back into the effects return of this Sebago, and dear Lord, what it sounds like. The problem is, I know it's not there forever, and I've always wanted to have like a forever sound in here that was just killer, that 20 years from now I can play out, and it's always consistent, right? That's why everyone's trying to go to digital, because tubes wear out, and once you've lost the tone of that tube even, let alone if you have to change the caps in one of these, which are just capacitors or whatever, when you start monkeying around inside of a amplifier like that, you change the tone of it and you'll never get it back. So I always wanted to catch a sound in here that was so good that I could use it the rest of my life, and I think I've done that. So another thing that I want to show you guys is this with the Kemper. So I'm going to turn this high end down just a little bit. Now there's a reason why I pulled my other hand up like that. I want you guys to know the biggest complaints about the Kemper, which is something else that I did in the Marshall Major. When you run out of the DI box or the Kemper into the DI box, I knew I needed to accentuate the touch response, right? So what I did was I used a couple of preamps that don't squash the sound. And what that did was that gave me unbelievable touch response, because once again you're going to lose some of the touch response going into the Kemper. These are all the normal complaints about digital gear that I was trying to accentuate, so that once I caught the profile in here, that the profile would sound like an amplifier. So I had to literally take everything in an amplifier and blow up what it did and still not try to lose the tone. And it's taken me a long time to do that. And so I'll explain to you what I mean. So if I turn the volume up in this amp, it's fairly quiet. Now I've got a little bit of noise in here because I got a fan running next to me, right? So I'm no hand here, right? I'll hold it up here so you guys can see. And look at the touch response here. It's very amp-like, right? So I hope that comes through on this microphone because it's screaming like an amp. So the bass is so heavy right now, I'm worried that it's squashing that input. So the KT150s got me that bass, right? And they also smoothed out the top end. I don't know that I would use KT150s in a guitar amplifier because they're pretty hard to get into distortion at a decent volume. They just blow your head off. So, but for a profile, it worked really good. So I just wanted to bring you guys this and show you I'm still messing with the Kemper. Right? Nice sustain, huh? And this is pretty much like right now at bedroom volume if I'm talking over it. Roll up the volume a little. The bass is so huge that it's not even real. I keep having to turn the bass down because the bass is like blowing me out of this right now. And I've got a Strat here. I'm going to turn the presence and whatnot down here. treble up a little bit here too. So I want to teach you guys one last trick before I go here. So here's the other trick. The other trick is that if you go in here to the EQ settings, I have a lot of the EQ settings almost buried. I don't know what that does to the Kemper, but it does good things to the Kemper. And then if you take all of these, I don't know if it's somehow the program set to where this is part of the preamp. I need to talk to Mr. Kemper about this, but if you bury all these and then back them off, right? You will get a much better reaction, finger reaction, touch response reaction out of this profiler. The other thing is when you go into the menu as far as the output, same thing. I bury all of these and then back them down accordingly. And sometimes I back them down quite a bit to get the tone I want. But sometimes in the output, in the EQ, bury them and then bring them back. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense, y'all. So let me pull some of just a clean tone here, and I'm going to be up on the neck pickup. Turn the bass back up a little bit, and I will turn the power amp up a hair. Just gorgeous, right? One last thing that people make as a mistake on the Kemper. So because the Kemper's a digital amp and it will give you a certain amount of distortion at a very low RPM or at a low overall volume, right? A lot of people turn the amp way down, and something I noticed as a mistake that I was making for a long time is I was turning the overall volume down and then trying to get it to sound exactly like an amp. Well, these speakers need to work a little bit just like a regular tube amp pushing them. So one thing that I would say is turn your master volume up quite a bit and then turn your volume down or change your pick attack as far as what you're doing on your guitar. So I'll show you what I mean. So this is relatively loud, right? Sounds very amp-like, and the reason why? This is sending plenty of power to the speakers, so now it a little bit more comes from my touch versus I'm trying to get the amp to react a certain way at very low volume. So what I mean is very soft. I mean, I'm barely touching this. So the amp tries to react a little bit better when the volume is way up. It'll act more amp-like. I hope if that explains anything. But I think I finally tricked the Kemper. It is pretty good. Fooling a lot of people, including myself, and now I play it next to my Marshall Major at times, and I go back to the Kemper and go, no, I think I'd rather play through the Kemper. So that is a milestone for me in the last 25 years, because never have I gone from any digital piece of gear to a piece of tube gear and not always gone, well, the tube gear always still sounds better. This is the one instance with this one single profile that I've created here, and hopefully I've done a decent job explaining it. If you guys have any questions, I can answer those questions, but this is also the reason why I've been gone for so long. I've literally been driving myself nuts trying to get a profile into this thing, and the means that I've gone to do that is like crazy town. And I think I finally have it. This is an extraordinary profile. And if it clipped the mic, I'm sorry, but like it's so loud right now in this room. So if I just touch, see, that's the mistake I think people make. They do not turn this up like they would a tube amp. You just generally know to turn a tube amp up if you want to get tone out of it and you want it to get loud and get super touch responsive. Well, this works the same way. So I hope I explained that a little bit, but like giving an example of this, I'm gonna just pluck on the A string, nothing here, right? Listen to how much louder this gets. So I'm barely talking now, and I'm talking over it, right? bottom of it. Let me turn the reverb up. Start out real slow. And I thought sometimes that you know, I was a Kemper buzzing like that or weird like that, and it's not. Even tube amplifiers will do it. It's forced me to listen to some tube amplifiers really carefully. You just assume that a tube amplifier does it better. And with this particular profile that I've created here, it's fantastic. It's really, 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 really good. And this guitar is not a very good representation of how well it does as far as distortion is concerned, because on the distortion, when I put distortion behind this thing, it just sounds fabulous. Now I have to turn it down a little bit or it'll blow me out of here. So you see there, I touched nothing. All I did was turn the distortion up and it starts feeding back just like a regular amp, right? Screaming, it's screaming like a regular amp. So there you go. Don't forget to go out and help a kid, help somebody, show somebody some love, do something nice for somebody. And if you can't, then be nice. Just try to be nice. And U-Rock will be back soon. I know I say that and then I'm not, so I apologize. But I love you guys. I'll see you soon. The new profile, we'll do more on this profile. This profile is killer. I want you to email me if you want this profile, and then promise me you're not going to share it with anybody, because I have something super special here, I think. I really do believe that. So thank you all for everything, and I'll see you soon.